You're listening to a live reading from the Aftermeyer universe. This is Ace's story. If you join late, the replay stays. It started with a scream. Not outside. Not yet. The first scream came from my servers. 6 monitors in my office, arranged in perfect, comforting symmetry, all burst alive with data noise at once. I'd seen traffic spikes before, DDoS attacks, bored kids, government probes trying and failing to slip past my perimeter. This was different, twitchy, unstable, almost patterned, if you could call it that. Emergency services spiked off the charts. Hospital networks jittered, then began collapsing. Even the city's weather API, something I monitored out of habit, hiccuped and spat garbage code, like a heart skipping beats. I dropped my mug. I didn't even realize it had slipped until ceramic shattered on the floor, and the bitter scorch of coffee rose in a cloud. I didn't have time to care. My hands moved before my brain caught up, typing, scripting, running packet traces. Muscle memory took the wheel. Fingers danced. Keys clacked, a quiet symphony of crisis. An IP chain routed from the city's 911 system straight into the hospital's internal network. Normally, that traffic would trickle. Incident reports, ambulance dispatches, routine noise. This came in waves. Each packet felt like an aftershock. I drilled down. ER floor cameras flickered, jagged clips of the waiting room, the triage desk, then flat lines. One feed froze on a single frame, a nurse's back, hunched over something I couldn't see, shadows pooling beneath harsh lights. It was late evening. Susan had the night shift at the hospital, and I was worried about her. My stomach dropped. My mind shifted into high gear. Logic circuits overriding emotion. I zoomed in on the hospital subnet and watched node after node blink out, like dominoes falling in silence. The last camera showed the ambulance bay, back doors flung wide, white metal streaked with red, a pair of scrubs crumpled in the grass. I didn't let myself linger. I toggled to social feeds, desperate for noise. The city's usual static, dog photos, lunch snaps, memes, had turned into a flood of video. I watched one on loop. A man on Main Street, shirtless, wild-eyed, arms dripping with something I knew wasn't paint. He staggered toward the camera, mouth working, hands clawing. The feed cut off when he lunged. Static, then nothing. That was when I felt it. The ground vibrated beneath my chair. Helicopters, not the distant, lazy chop of news traffic. Heavier, lower, military. I ducked instinctively, a curse catching in my throat, even though I was sealed inside my office, surrounded by glass, wood, and 1,000 miles of wire. That sound didn't belong here. I reached for my phone. I called Susan again and again. Each attempt rang out unanswered. I sent messages too. Each one ignored, each one a small, precise stab of worry. No response. Dead air. My heart hammered, every beat sharpening into something close to pain. I tried the hospital switchboard. Dead. I wiped my hands on my jeans, smearing coffee and sweat. My thoughts snapped to my checklist. Dad's old voice in my head. Inventory, fortification, communications, logistics. Alternate power. I repeated it like a mantra. But first, more data. Always more data. I isolated the strangest traffic bleed I could find. Encrypted. No header. Bouncing between city-owned routers on ports nobody should have been using. I couldn't crack the payload, but I didn't need to. Lockdown protocols. Someone was sealing the city shut. Or keeping something in. I scanned the feeds again. The radio spat static, then a dispatcher's voice broke through. Hi, Reedy, already crying. The word biting surfaced again and again before the mic overloaded with a squeal. I scribbled notes beside my keyboard. My hands were steady. Panic would kill me. I let out a long breath, counted to 5, and forced adrenaline into focus. Adapt, improvise, survive. I set my phone to vibrate and pocketed it. I glanced at the woods outside my window, too still for this time of day. The green looked flat, dead. Quiet was supposed to be peaceful. Now it screamed danger. I toggled the home security system to maximum. It wouldn't stop anyone determined, but it gave me something like control. I slid open my desk drawer. My father's knife caught the light. Steel glinted, the kanji for discipline etched along the blade, the same symbol tattooed on my right hand. I pressed my thumb to the engraving and let the cold bite my skin. I checked the feeds again. The city's electrical grid was going dark, block by block. On my map, outages bloomed like an infection spreading. Sirens, screams, the rotor thump of helicopters circling like vultures. A single gunshot echoed from a neighboring farm, maybe a mile away. The sound cut straight through me. I pulled up Susan's last text. Late shift. Love you. Don't wait up. Everything about it felt sharp. Final. I memorized every curve of every letter, every missed comma, as if reading it enough times might change the world outside. I pushed away from the desk, and I started a war. First, inventory. I moved through the kitchen, counting calories and shelf life, calculating weights, granola, protein bars, dry beans, canned soup, enough if I rationed. I filled a 5-gallon jug from the tap, knowing the well could foul if the grid stayed down. Filtration tablets, backup barrels. The gravity-fed pump still worked, for now. Dad's emergency bag waited in the hall closet. I pulled it out and checked every compartment. Med kit, rope, fire starter, multi-tool, solar packs, rain gear. I added Susan's old sweatshirt, pressed it to my face once, caught the faint trace of her shampoo, then shoved it away. No time. The power flickered, then died. The house fell silent, broken only by backup batteries clicking alive. I cycled the ham radio. Static. Panic. One voice cried for help, then vanished. I wrote down the frequency anyway. I raided the gun safe. Hands steady. Pistol. Ammo. I practiced loading, slow and methodical. Click, click, click. The knife felt more honest and quieter. I checked the generator, the solar backup, fuel reserves. Everything would last if I was smart, if I didn't make mistakes. I went to the window. The front lawn looked different now. Not a buffer, a gap, an open stretch between me and whatever waited at the tree line. I lifted my scope and scanned the field. Something moved, too slow for a deer, too upright for a bear. Then another figure burst from the trees, running and screaming, blood streaking down an arm. The first shape turned, jerky, animal, fast. The screaming stopped. Silence. My heart climbed into my throat, but I forced it down. I didn't look away from the spot where the sound had died. All that remained was a low electric buzz in my ears. Then, behind me, the landline, dead for years, crackled to life. I spun. An unknown voice bled through static. They're inside. Run. The line went dead. My heartbeat became the loudest sound in the universe. The only thing more certain than the chaos outside was that it had finally found me. The dial tone faded, leaving me alone with the truth. Whatever nightmare broke, the city was now knocking at my door, and I still had no word from Susan. It started with a scream. Not outside. Not yet. The first scream came from my servers. The landline's dead static echoed in my skull as I stood motionless, my palm still pressed to the plastic. The garbled warning dissolved into the dark, leaving my thoughts suspended for a heartbeat too long. My mind, usually quick to lock onto the next step, stuttered. Then it snapped back into gear. I forced myself to breathe, every inhale raw and sharp, my ribcage tight with anticipation. The house felt too silent. The world outside wound so tight that the hairs on my arms prickled. Then, without warning, a thunderous crash ripped through the night. The impact rattled the glassware in the kitchen and sent vibrations shivering through the floorboards. A metallic shriek followed, sharp and tearing, and my heart slammed hard against my chest. I ducked instinctively, thinking explosion, earthquake, maybe a transformer blowing nearby. But as the echo faded and the world held its breath, another sound followed. Steel groaning under strain, an engine shuddering to death, glass exploding in a chain of brittle, cascading notes. The noise rolled across the fields like a warning bell, as if the earth itself had cracked open. I pressed low against the wall, every sense straining as the ringing in my ears slowly faded. In its place came scraping, groaning, and the unmistakable thud of bodies hitting ground. Something massive had crashed close. My mind traced the map of my property and the old county road skirting the woods. That ditch had claimed cars before, but nothing like this. I pictured the late weekend bus that sometimes ran that route, half empty and battered. The timing was wrong, but nothing was right anymore. I crawled to the front window, careful not to silhouette myself. Through the curtain's edge, the yard lay washed in blue-gray moonlight, familiar lines twisted by fear. At first, nothing moved but my own reflection in the glass. Then I caught motion near the road, where the trees parted. Headlights, askew, burned through a haze of fresh smoke. The bus lay on its side, one wheel still spinning, the rear bumper torn free and glinting in the grass. Steam billowed from the crushed front end, curling up into the night. For a long moment, everything held still. Then the silence fractured again. Doors wrenched open, hinges screaming, something heavy tumbling onto gravel and dirt. I froze, eyes locked on the wreck. There were no shouts for help, no panicked passengers climbing free. Only a low, unnatural groaning, at first almost human, then deepening into something hollow and wrong. Figures spilled from the ruined shell, crawling over seats and pushing through broken windows. They moved unevenly, limbs swinging wide, heads lolling, some crawling on all fours before standing again. Their faces were slack and unfocused, lost to pain or hunger, or both. My stomach twisted at the sight. Men and women, no uniforms, no badges, just ordinary lives ruined. Jeans, sneakers, a suit jacket slicked dark with blood. They clustered near the bus, uncertain. Then one slowly turned its head toward the house. It shambled forward, guided by nothing but inertia, and the others drifted after it. Their moans rose and fell, not words, not even animal calls, just noise that vibrated in my chest. I ducked lower, hands shaking as I scanned the yard. The porch and the stretch of grass between the house and the road suddenly felt like a stage. I ran my checklist again. Locks, deadbolts, the steel bar, barricaded windows. My fingers brushed the knife at my belt, then the pistol in my waistband. Everything felt heavier now, more real. Outside, the dead moved in fits and starts, drawn not by thought or malice, but by sound and motion alone. They converged toward the porch light I'd forgotten to kill. I cursed under my breath and scrambled to the panel, plunging the house into deeper darkness. The shadows pressed in, thick and heavy. I crept to the back door and checked the chair wedged beneath the handle. Every groan outside sounded amplified, vibrating through beams and glass into my bones. My mind mapped fallback routes, the crawl space, the attic ladder, the laundry window opening onto the woods, each option unspooled behind my eyes. Somewhere else I imagined Susan doing the same, running her own calculations, making her own impossible choices. The moaning thickened. Now it came from every side of the house. I crawled to the office and powered up the battery-fed monitors. The feeds flickered to life, showing a dozen figures spreading across the lawn in a ragged arc. Some bumped into each other and rebounded. Others pressed faces to the fence, fingers probing seams. It wasn't leadership. It was magnetism. A garden gnome spun through the air as one stumbled. Another tripped, struggled, then stood again. My mouth tasted of metal and bile, but my mind kept working. Count ammo, count exits, count breaths. A branch snapped near the porch. One of them climbed the steps and pressed its face to the glass, smearing something dark. It began to pound with tireless persistence. The others noticed and drifted closer, drawn by the promise of noise. I braced my shoulder against the door, the wood trembling with each blow. The pistol stayed lowered. A shot would only call the rest. I pressed my forehead to the frame, listening past the cacophony, hoping irrationally for a human voice. Then a new sound tore through the night, an engine straining, tires screaming on gravel. Headlights carved wild arcs across the field, turning the herd into jerking silhouettes. A car skidded to a halt at the edge of the yard. A door flew open. A figure spilled out. A living scream cut through the dark. The dead turned as one and surged toward the sound. Not faster, just denser. The scream snapped and vanished beneath reaching hands and empty faces. For a moment, the porch cleared and the pressure on my doors eased. But I knew the cycle. When the noise stopped, whatever attention remained would swing back to me. The last warm thing in the dark, my home, my fortress, was shrinking with every crash and groan. The world outside was coming, slow but certain. As the final screams faded and the dead began to drift back toward the porch, I understood one thing clearly. My next move had to be perfect. I was running out of time, and there was nowhere left to hide. It started with a scream. Not outside, not yet. The first scream came from my servers. My world condensed to raw sensation. The sick stench of rot pressed beneath the door. Glass rattled. An animal groan swelled just outside the walls. I crouched behind the front door, running through every failed plan and every escape route I'd mapped in my head. Susan's name pulsed through my thoughts, a mantra and a curse. I needed to move. I needed to get to her, but the only way out now lay through whatever hell was clawing at my house. A pane shattered near the porch. The sound was sharp and instant. Cold night air rushed in, carrying something sour and fetid. I snapped upright, knife in hand, and watched a mottled arm reach through the jagged hole, groping blindly. Fingers splayed, twitching. My heart thudded so hard it blurred my vision. Fear tried to pin me in place, but I forced myself forward, slamming my weight against the door to wedge it tighter. The porch boards groaned under shifting weight. A second hand appeared, then a third, skin torn, nails black with soil and blood. I slashed at the nearest wrist. The blade bit deep, but the arm only jerked and kept coming, leaking dark blood onto the floor. No cry, no flinch, just dumb persistence. A shoulder forced through the gap, flesh splitting on the glass. The face followed, slack-jawed, eyes rolling, unseeing except for that terrible, instinctive hunger. I tried to scream, Only a ragged gasp came out. My father's knife suddenly felt small against a tide that didn't know fear. I staggered back as the first body squeezed through, landing with a wet thud on the hardwood. Another followed, then another. The door shuddered on its hinges. I slashed at the first one, catching cheek, ear, neck. Blood spat, but it didn't slow. It grabbed for me with both hands, mouth gaping. I stabbed, shoulder, chest, belly. Nothing. It kept coming. Its fingers closed around my forearm, cold and iron strong, nails biting into my skin. Instinct took over. I kicked, slammed my fist into its face. It barely reacted. The stench hit me so hard, tears sprang to my eyes. I stumbled, lost my grip on the knife for a second, then snatched it back. The second one fell beside me, grabbing my ankle. I hacked at its arm, but the grip only tightened, nails scoring grooves into my flesh. My mind spun, calculating, hunting for anything that would work. I tried to wrench free, but their weight dragged me down, pinning me to the floor. The third was crawling now, groaning, teeth snapping. Panic built until it threatened to burst. I thought of Susan, not as a memory, but as a lifeline. I couldn't die here. I twisted, planted my foot, and drove the heel of my hand into the nearest one's chin. Its jaw snapped shut, but it barely noticed. I got a knee into its chest, shoved off, and grabbed the knife in both hands. Somewhere in the white noise panic, my father's voice cut through. Always aim for the center. But if the beast keeps coming, you go for the engine, the head. I don't know if it was instinct or blind luck. As the first one lunged, mouth wide, I jerked my arm and stabbed upward. The knife punched through the underside of its jaw and into the skull. There was resistance. Then a sudden, jellied give. The body went limp instantly, collapsing on top of me. For a split second, the world stopped. Its grip slackened. No twitching, no more grabbing. Dead. Finally dead. My arm trembled as I yanked the blade free, sticky with something foul. Shock, relief, disbelief. I shoved the corpse aside and spun to the next one. It was still crawling, still reaching, driven only by hunger. I aimed for the head this time. I drove the knife into its temple. The skull caved just enough, and the body spasmed once before going still. My lungs burned as I sucked in air, the taste of blood and decay thick on my tongue. A third was already inside, feet thudding, arms flailing. I dodged, felt nails rake my back, then caught it with a wild slice across the brow. It didn't slow. It dragged me down, teeth snapping inches from my face. I screamed and struck again, up, into the eye socket. The knife stuck. The body dropped. Dead weight slumped across my chest. I bucked it off, sobbing. The knife clenched so tight my knuckles ached. My arms shook, adrenaline and pain ringing through me. Outside, more bodies pressed against the house. Glass cracked. Moans grew louder, drawn by scent and violence. I staggered to my feet, slipping in blood, dragging the bodies aside to clear space. Sweat ran down my neck. My hands trembled as I checked the barricade. The door was splintered, the hinges strained. More fists, more faces at the windows. My mind replayed the fight in broken flashes. Only when I went for the head did they stop. Every time, I stared at my bloodied hands, the realization burning through the panic. It wasn't enough to wound them. Pain didn't matter. Blood didn't matter. Destroy the brain, and they dropped instantly. I let out a sharp, hysterical laugh. The truth was simple and monstrous. The house was no longer a sanctuary. Every window was a weakness, every wall a thin barrier. The infected pressed closer, mindless and determined. Susan's face swam behind my eyes. I was running out of time, running out of strength. The knowledge in my hands was both salvation and curse. I braced for the next wave, knife slick but steady, breath ragged with exhaustion. The porch groaned again, more weight, more bodies. Glass shattered at the back of the house. Too many, too fast. I drew in a lungful of cold air and set my feet. Then the power failed for good. The house plunged into darkness, and the back door gave way as the infected poured in, their hands reaching, their shadows swallowing the last of the light. It started with a scream. Not outside, not yet. The first scream came from my servers. Darkness slammed down, thick and suffocating, as the generator died and the last traces of artificial light vanished. I crouched in the blackness, knife slick in my grip, my heart pounding like a war drum. At first I couldn't see anything, only the memory of ruined bodies and the sick tang of blood clawing at my nose. Every sound felt magnified. Each scuff, each thump, echoed off wood and plaster, impossible to place. Glass cracked in the kitchen. Another body forced its way through the broken window, dragging a chair down with it. The porch groaned as more weight pressed against the front door. Then the old wood gave way, with a damp, splintered crunch. Cold air rushed inside, carrying the dense, living stench of the infected. Something shuffled within arm's reach, a silhouette darker than the rest, moving on blind instinct. For a moment, panic tried to freeze me. I pressed my back to the wall and stayed absolutely still, forcing each breath silent and measured. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, my vision began to sharpen. Outlines formed, the ruined threshold, the glistening trail of blood. Slack, lurching figures crowded through the breach. Not fast, not smart, relentless. I let instinct take over. My world shrank to the space around me and the cold steel in my hand. One of them lurched past, its hip brushing the stairwell. It didn't see me, but the gasp I couldn't stifle made it turn. I raised the knife as its hands grazed my chest and drove the blade upward, catching cheek, then jaw. It groaned and clawed at my arm. I tore free and stabbed again. This time, by luck or muscle memory, I caught it behind the ear. The body went limp and collapsed at my feet. There was no time to think. The fight dissolved into chaos. I dodged a second infected, felt fingers snag my shirt, then slipped on blood as more bodies pressed in. The stench of decay and sweat burned my sinuses. My eyes kept adjusting. I could see better now. Glass shards glinted on the floor. Curtains hung torn. Bodies blocked every escape. I kept moving, slashing low and jabbing upward, each strike a desperate calculation. Susan's face burned behind my eyes. I had to get out. I had to get to her. Then my pocket vibrated. The sudden buzz startled me so badly I nearly dropped the knife. My phone, somehow still alive, its blue glow cutting through the dark. I checked it with shaking hands. Susan, at hospital. It's chaos. Stay put. Do not leave the house. Please survive. I love you. I pressed my forehead to the wall, fighting tears, rage, and terror. She was alive. She was telling me to stay. But the house was collapsing around me. Glass shattered, wood splintered. I wanted to reply. Wait, I'm coming. The screen flickered with a low battery warning. A crash in the living room snapped me back. Two infected tumbled over each other, knocking a lamp aside. I lashed out, driving the knife into the temple of one as it crawled toward me. It dropped. My movements grew surer as my vision adapted to the gloom. Each skull strike ended the same way. I fought backward, slipping through the narrowest gaps, grabbing what I could with my free hand. A first aid kit, a flashlight, cash from the junk drawer. The house was filling. Hands reached from every direction. Bodies pressed in, slow but crushing. My arms burned. My lungs screamed. Then the thought hit me. The car keys. They were still hanging by the kitchen door. Without the truck, I'd never reach Susan. I caught a glimpse of the key ring, glinting as another infected clawed at the frame. So close. I forced myself forward, 1 meter at a time. Another body dropped. Hands closed around my ankle and dragged me down. I kicked, stomped, stabbed blindly. More blood, more twitching. I crawled, fingers scraping the floor, but the gap was closing. Bodies clogged every doorway. I staggered up, vision swimming. It was no use. Too many. The keys hung just out of reach. I lunged, and a heavy body slammed into my back, sending me sprawling. The knife flew from my hand and skidded under the table. For one wild moment, I thought about making a final stand. Then Susan's words echoed in my head. Stay alive. I had to live. Clutching the flashlight and medkit, I burst through the laundry room door, ducked under the broken window, and hurled myself outside. Glass tore at my forearm, warm blood trailing down. I hit the ground hard, rolled, and ran. The infected followed, a mindless tide spilling into the yard. I reached the old shed and slammed the door behind me, my body shaking with exhaustion and shock. For a moment, the world narrowed to my ragged breathing and the flashlight beam cutting through dust and webs. I pressed my back to the wall and listened. Susan needed me. The car keys were still inside. If I wanted any hope of reaching her, I'd have to go back. The thought nearly broke me. The shed shuddered as another wave of infected closed in, drawn by blood and noise. I was wounded, unarmed, and trapped. My only hope was behind a wall of monsters, and every second, that hope was shrinking. It started with a scream. Not outside. Not yet. The first scream came from my servers. My back pressed to the warped boards of the shed, every muscle taut, every nerve singing with pain and exhaustion. Blood trickled down my arm where the glass had sliced me, the wound already sticky and half numb. My lungs burned, but I forced my breathing to slow. I had made it out. Barely. That wasn't enough. Survival now required more than sprinting into the dark and hoping for luck. If I wanted to reach Susan, I had to take control. No more panic. No more running blind. The infected battered the house, the noise echoing through the night like a warning bell. A few peeled away, drawn toward the shed by sound and the scent of blood. Their shadows loomed against the thin wall. Fear churned in my stomach, but I boxed it in and locked it down. Think, plan, execute. That was the only way she would ever see me again. I checked my pockets, cataloging what I'd saved in my flight. A battered flashlight, the med kit, half scattered, but usable. Matches, a compact knife from my camping bag. No gun. I'd left it behind, unwilling to fire and bring the whole area down on me. My father's knife was gone, lost in the press of bodies. I opened the med kit and dressed my wounds as best I could, pressing gauze to the gash on my arm and wrapping it tight until the bleeding slowed. The shed gave me shelter and almost nothing else. Rusted tools, a coil of nylon rope, an old crowbar. My hand found the cold weight of a hatchet, heavy, nicked, but solid. It would do. I listened, mapping the infected by sound. Most lingered near the house, some shuffling on the porch, others circling the broken window. Two remained near the shed, groaning softly. Waiting them out would get me killed. I needed the house, the supplies, the keys. More than anything, I needed Susan. Her last text burned in my thoughts. Not a comfort, but an order. Stay alive. If I failed, she'd be alone. I wasn't letting that happen. I looped the rope around my waist, tested the hatchet's balance, then pulled the latch and flung the door open. The nearest infected turned, arms rising, mouth open in a silent scream. The smell hit me in a wave, sweet, rotten, overwhelming. I didn't hesitate. One step forward, hatchet up, aim for the head. The blade sank deep, splitting the skull with a jarring stop. The body dropped instantly, twitching once before going still. The second came slower. I sidestepped, let it stumble, and buried the blade in its temple. It fell like a tree. I dragged both bodies into the grass and wiped the hatchet clean on my pant leg. Every movement deliberate, no wasted energy. I was learning, adapting. I circled wide and flanked the house, reaching the kitchen window I'd escaped through earlier. The yard was littered with corpses, but more still wandered the porch. I timed their movements, counted their passes, then climbed through the jagged frame. The kitchen was ruined. Blood, glass, overturned chairs. Bodies lay slumped in dark pools. Then I saw it beneath the table. The knife. My father's knife lay half hidden in shadow, exactly where I'd dropped it. I closed my hand around the familiar grip. The balance felt right, certain. I let the hatchet fall. Too heavy, too slow. One infected crawled along the pantry, dragging a broken leg. I waited until it turned its head. One precise thrust ended it. Step by step, I cleared the house. No wasted strikes, no panic. Straight to the skull, every time. The living room was the worst. A tangled pile near the door. When one rolled from under the couch, clawing at my boot, I knelt and crushed its skull with calm precision. Fear became a tool. I slowed myself, checked every shadow, gathered what I could. Water, energy bars, batteries, a spare flashlight, clean clothes, the map with our emergency routes. Upstairs was quiet. The guest room stood empty, curtains fluttering. The master bedroom still smelled faintly of Susan. I couldn't afford to linger. I took gloves, a rain jacket, a heavy steel flashlight, and moved on. The front hall was last. The car keys glinted on the hook by the door. 2 infected still blocked the way. I approached slowly. The first turned. I stepped in and drove the knife through its temple. It dropped. The second lunged. I slipped inside its reach and slid the blade up beneath the jaw. Silence followed. I took the keys, my hand shaking only a little. Cold metal. Solid. Real. I checked my supplies one last time, clipped the keys to my belt, and slung the pack across my chest. The house was ruined, but it had given me what I needed. I slipped out the back, hugged the wall, and reached the truck. The door unlocked with a soft click. I slid inside and turned the key. The engine roared to life. Every infected head snapped toward the sound. Hands slammed against the windows as bodies surged forward. I floored the gas. The truck lurched through the dark, toward the city, toward Susan, toward whatever waited ahead. Every second a gamble between hope and annihilation.